and we'll do a little deeper dive. So I am Rich Edwards. I work for Wilco Tech, and we run the Army's training and certification tracking system, ATCTS, that's been tracking 8570 requirements for the Army for over 15 years. We took our experience from there, and we developed what you're going to see today, which is the CyberStar platform, which was designed, based on all the experience we had with 8570 and knowing that 8140 was coming. We designed a software platform to be able to handle both frameworks simultaneously, because we know there's a transition time, and also, frankly, any other sort of work role qualification-based platform we can support as well. And I'll be showing more of that, like sort of nuts and bolts of the software itself. So today, what will we cover? We're going to cover, a little bit of the 8140 basics, which is a little bit of a repeat from our last webinar. But then we'll also talk a little bit about the compliance timeline and what are the requirements to track, code and track. We'll talk a little bit about the reporting systems in place, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into what are known as the qualification matrices. How do you qualify for a particular work role? And that's where things get, really, you kind of get into the nitty gritty there. And that'll be probably a fair amount of what we cover today. So let me keep us going. So 8140, wildly more expansive than 8570. So if folks are aware, 8570 had, roughly 15 work roles, the IAT 1s, 2s, and 3s, IAMs, IASAEs, and a few specialties. And, a baseline cert for each one of those. And so, it sounds easy, but we know in practice it's not easy, even tracking that. And then also you have to throw in, when you're talking cyber, it's, throw in cyber awareness challenge, throw in user agreements, throw in there's privilege level access agreements, et cetera. There's a lot to be tracked that isn't necessarily even part of a regulation, but is important to track, for the cyber workforce. So 8140 has come along now, and we're big fans of it because we think it's a step in the right direction, in that it's gone to these 71 different work roles that are more, they look a lot more like job titles and descriptions, which is good. An IAT 1, you have no idea what I do. But hey, if I'm a software developer level 1, then that gives you some insight into it. So we think this is a great idea, but it does not simplify the tracking and reporting requirements or just even managing your workforce requirements. And so it does take some automation, some help. And that's what we built CyberStar for. So the way the DoD has broken things down, so they started with the NICE framework from NIST, but they've even already sort of modified for the DoD's purposes. So NIST talked about categories and specialty areas is category, specialty area, and then work role. And the DoD has kind of simplified that and said, now we're going to talk about workforce elements. And so there are these 7 workforce elements, which each has its own set of work roles. And that's again, part of what I'm trying to do is explain the nomenclature, so that when you hear these things or see these things, it's not surprising. So workforce elements is the breakdown that the DoD has gone with, and they're good ones. They did add as part of releasing the manual is they actually added AI and data as a workforce element with 11 work roles associated with that. And they also split out software engineering as a new workforce element. There's 8 work roles there. So they're trying to categorize these things and make them understandable in a way that hopefully helps organize your workforce. These work roles they're much more aligned to job function. And so here's my eye chart slide, which is here are all of the work roles broken down by workforce element. I just highlighted a few here just so you can get a sense of them, but like, hey, data scientist is now a work role. AO, right? Authorizing official, that's a work role. ISSM, DBA, even things like cyber legal advisors. So I'm not going to go through every one of these, but these start to look a lot more practical, a lot more geared towards what is it that this role does, and then more importantly is like, well, literally what do they do? And that's where we get into, for every work role, there are these set of KSATs, they're called, right? So knowledge, skills, abilities, and tasks. And so, one of the powerful aspects of this framework of 8140 is it does really get down into the nitty gritty of, if I'm an ISSM, like, what do I do? And what are my, what are the tasks, what are the skills, knowledge, et cetera, that I need to perform in this role? And so that's very helpful. It's good. And in fact, and we've seen several agencies begin to leverage the KSAT information to basically craft job descriptions, right? And craft like, hey, I'm looking for someone who can do this. What does that entail? Well, here it is. It's all spelled out. And what I'm showing here is just a screenshot of the DCWF, the Cyber Exchange website, which has all this information on it. So it's a great source of the information. It's got all the work roles and all the KSATs per work role. And so it's an excellent resource. If you haven't been there, highly recommend it, because in the end, these are the things that people will be held accountable to. Now there are some shortcuts as far as what are called qualification matrices, and I think that's my next slide, maybe. Oh, sorry, no. Yeah, we'll talk timeline here first, but I will get into the what qualifies you for a particular role here in the next slide or two. I managed to lose my slide previewer. So compliance timeline, though, in February of this year, the manual was published, and basically the only real requirement there was that says, hey, all contracted personnel, all contractors are expected to be able to meet the requirements of a particular work role. Now, that's only if the contract called out that work role, right? So, and we're seeing this more and more, that more and more RFPs and proposals and contracts are starting to call out the DCWF or 8140 work roles. And so the intent is, hey, if you put a contractor in the position, they need to be qualified. Now, 8140 explains what that entails, but it doesn't put any burden on reporting that out from a just strictly manual regulation standpoint. Where the reporting really comes in is for civilians and military personnel, and this is where things ultimately go all the way up to Congress. But so the manual has said, okay, by next February 15th, you need to be able to report out on who, from a military and civilian personnel standpoint, is in which role, and also which proficiency level. And that's just like 8570 had the level 1, 2, and 3. DCWF says the same thing. It's basic, intermediate, or advanced. So it's not just, hey, what work role am I in, but at what level am I expected to work? And so the main effort right now, and I'm sure probably folks on this call may have been tasked with this, is start coding all your people, because this is a requirement coming, next February. You have to be able to report out on who's in what role from a cyber worker standpoint, and at what level are they working. It's also required that this is handled through authoritative systems, manpower and personnel systems. I think I have a later slide on this as well. But so the DoD and the various branches have been working to upgrade. So DCPDS, for example, if you're using that for managing civilian positions, it's already got support to be able to code to DCWF work roles. Similarly, so FMS Web for the Army, these systems have the capability to at least code people and say what work role and what proficiency level. And then those things, as is the case today, right? So DCPDS, FMS Web, all these things can report up through the various mechanisms through DMDC and all the way up to Advana at the highest level. So that's kind of step one, is just having the view of the workforce, who's doing what, who's in what work roles, and those those manpower systems especially, they also have the notion of unfilled work roles. And so that information is super important, and that's kind of step one on this journey of the 8140 regulation. Is step one, figure out where we're at, like who's in what roles and what roles are empty. Because from a very high level manpower view of the world, you want to know those things. You want to see where the gaps are. But as it gets a couple years out here, so into 2025, then the requirement is not just, hey, who's in what role, but like, are they qualified? Can you prove the qualifications? And this is where, it gets considerably more involved, because what qualifies you for a particular role has gotten a lot more expansive in a good way, we think, but also harder to track. And they sort of staged it. So in 2025, it's, hey, they said cybersecurity workforce element is the main one we're concerned about. That's about 13 of those 71 work roles. But then the very next year in 2026, it's essentially everybody. So the goal is, by 2026, anyone that's in a cyber work role is coded. They have the proficiency level. The qualifications are well known. They meet the qualifications. You can show that they meet the qualifications. That is the whole goal. And ongoing, which is down here in the A and B here, ongoing, you'll always have the opportunity, and we'll get into these foundational versus residential qualifications, but there was always a grace period, right? So the foundational qualifications will be required within 9 months of an assignment, and then there are residential qualifications within 12 months. So there's always this intent that, hey, it's gonna, we know you get someone in a new position, it's going to take some time, but it's not for forever. There are deadlines associated with them. And this is what I was mentioning, authoritative systems. So the manual calls out like, hey, we need to leverage authoritative systems, and for which there are many. Like I mentioned, DCPDS on the civilian side. Each of the major branches has their own system. What we haven't seen, aside from the products that we offer, like we don't see, there is no real authoritative system around contractors. But the Army, with their ATCTS system, is they're very interested in tracking everyone that's working on any of their networks or any of their systems. And so they've built into ATCTS the ability to track contractors and their qualifications. And we have done something similar now for DCSA. Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. They're using our CyberStar platform, and they call it CWCM, Cyber Workforce Compliance Management Tool, but it is our CyberStar tool, and so they're tracking all the personnel, basically anyone that touches a keyboard. So contractors, civilians, military personnel, everyone is being tracked through our CyberStar system. But the existing authoritative systems like FMS Web, FMTS, DCPDS, these systems are designed to be able to capture this information and report them up really for the year one requirements. What we've gleaned, and we do meet regularly with the DoD CIO office on these topics, because we're trying to facilitate and make these things, you know, achievable, is they don't really see any of these authoritative systems probably ever getting to the point of actually, you know, proving that the people are qualified. It's much more the coding. It's much more manpower oriented, which is fine, right? And that's very necessary. But where Wilco and CyberStar pick up is in that, hey, let us help you track the qualifications, because it's not getting any easier. 8570 looks simple on paper. Everyone that we talk to, it isn't so simple in practice, because it's people, it's trainings, it's deadlines, it's all kinds of things that are difficult, frankly, for humans to keep track of. So I mentioned qualification matrices. So this is the heart of 8140. And this diagram is right off the DCWF website, but it's essentially for every single work role, and there's the 71, and for each proficiency level, so basic, intermediate, and advanced, there are a set of qualifications that qualify you for that role. And here's where we think that this is an advantage. This is a good direction to go in, because if you notice all the ORs here, so if I'm in a particular work role, I might be able to, if I have a degree, for example, like an associate's degree at a basic level, perhaps in a relevant domain, that might qualify me. Or there are these training options. And so training, and this is again defined in the manual and through the CWMB, the Cyber Workforce Management Board, they actually have condoned, like, hey, here are courses, training courses that work for this particular work role and this particular proficiency level. And I think I have it right here. This is available on the, again, DCWF Works website, but this has been compiled and said for, you know, each of the major branches has submitted things, and you see things like, you know, hey, there's a training course and it applies at a particular proficiency level, and there's you know, there's a couple hundred of them in here, so it's not a small list, and these things do qualify you. So they've gone away from, and again, we think it's a good thing, gone away from just a cert. No, it could be a training or it could be a degree. And so all these things are possible. Again, they get harder and harder to track, but that's why we built CyberStar. As you'll see here shortly, we built it to be able to contain this information, to set this policy, and then track things, you know, per individual, whether they're meeting the qualifications or not. There also is this foundational qualification alternative. This is important because, excuse me, so far the DoD has, let me find the right one here. They have published these qualification matrices for, yeah, I don't know, roughly about half of the work roles. And so it tells you, specifically for the software developer in this example, basic, intermediate, advanced, could be an associate's degree for basic, or they mentioned the training, offerings listed in that training repository, and that was this spreadsheet that I was showing you. So it could be one of those, or it could be a cert, or it could be this conditional alternative. And what that amounts to is, if there is no qualification matrix defined, which is the case for about half of these work roles today, I mean, I'm sure that's going to change. Then the idea is that you could do if you get down to that KSAT level, then you can do an evaluation of a particular individual and determine, between them and typically their manager or the ISSM or another SME in that role, can sort of are able to qualify that person. And what the DoD has provided thus far in that regard is this example spreadsheet, which is the experience evaluation tool, which for a given role, in this case, it's the AO role at the intermediate level. Here's all your KSATs. These can be pulled right off the DCWF worksite, or I'll show you in Cyberstar, you can also have access to these. But the idea is there's some sort of an evaluation. Typically starts with employee, like, yes, I do these things, and here's an example. But then the idea is that, supervisor or SME reviews, and then what's called out in the manual is, for a given role, you need to be proficient in at least 70% of those to be considered qualified, which is probably fair, and probably also speaks to, room for growth, et cetera. But the idea of doing that KSAT level assessment is always an alternative, even if there are defined qualification matrices. You always have the option of just doing an evaluation, and this would be real useful when someone's been doing a job for a long time and they clearly have all the skills. It's not too hard to check off all the boxes, and that is considered a conditional alternative. That is considered a legitimate way to express that someone is qualified in a job, which again we think is a great idea, because it's not, oh, just go get your security plus and then you're considered qualified. No, it's like you've been doing the job and your boss knows it and you know it, and you can document and qualify yourself through experience. Great. That's good. That's what we want. We want the people who particularly have been doing a job. It should not be hard to qualify. And that's the intent. And then you get into, so that's the foundational stuff. And then you get into residential qualifications, and what those are is, unique to a component or unique to a unit even. And what the DoD is looking for here is you're probably already doing on the job training. Most people are. And oftentimes it's well structured. So the idea is to leverage the the 8140 framework to accommodate that and to value that. So we've talked to folks and they're like, oh yeah, we do JQRs, or we have an OJT program and this is how it works. That's the idea, and that's the point. I think what the requirement is, though, from the manual standpoint, is you have to write it down. It has to be documented somehow. So you have to say, for this job, this is our policy, or this is how we do on the job training. It's written down and it's tracked. And so this is a big aspect of 8140 is record the policy, record how you're doing things, and then track that the people are actually doing those things. And that's where, you know, frankly, the chore of doing that it's extensive. And it is, again, why we built CyberStar, because we saw this coming and we're like, man, this is going to be really hard if you're trying to do it in spreadsheets and you know, a SharePoint repository or something like that. It's going to get really, really hard. This is a great place for software to step in and help, you know, help capture the requirements, capture the tracking, keep people on task, et cetera. And again, I will show that here shortly as to how we go about doing that with the CyberStar. But also residential includes things like computing environment, which again it was sort of a tack on in some ways. Like in the 8570 didn't require any sort of computing environment stuff, but everyone's been doing it, right? Everyone's like, hey, you're a Linux, you know, sysadmin, you need Linux computing environment training. So a lot of that's been happening already, but what 8140 has done is said, okay, we know, like, that's important, so make that part of the definition. And again, that the residential, because it depends on your organization. You know, like, hey, my DBAs, we're Oracle, right? We're an Oracle shop, so I need my DBAs to have Oracle specific training and or certifications. And so the idea is that you can define that for your organization, and even down to the unit level, but then it has to be, you know, tracked and reported on. Again, we're trying to make that easy through the CyberStar platform. And then finally, annual maintenance. Used to be just had to keep your certs up to date, you know, so sometimes there's an annual sort of renewal course or what have you, but certainly every 3 years. So the continuous professional development includes things like CPEs, if you're using a cert for qualification, keeping that up to date. And there's a lot of other professional activities, we call them, that can also apply. And again, it'll be up to the discretion of the organization to say what those are. But it could be things, and the manual calls out things like, for example, hey, I published a paper, or I did a cyber range exercise, or I did, you know, but it's going to be, the idea is that we want people to stay up to date, and we want people to, you know, maintain their skill sets, but hopefully it's through meaningful activities that you kind of would want to do anyway. But again, the requirement is that you track it and that you can report out on it. So this is kind of a recap of all of the above, but as an example, a security architect, you know, which is code 652, at the different proficiency levels, there are different requirements. So as you can see, basic and intermediate, you can have an associate's degree, but at the advanced level, you know, you need a bachelor's degree, or you could have one of these NDU CIC trainings. There's 2 and 3 depending on which level, or you could have a certification, or you could do the KSAT assessment. So there are lots of options, and you know, yes, it's more complicated and maybe harder to track, but it's also we feel like it's a lot more practical. So yeah, if I've got a bachelor's degree in computer science and I'm a security architect, that's good. I'm good. I'm qualified. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the residential qualifications. So computing environments could be more KSAT assessments, could be on-the-job training, could be really almost. And again, I think that the point of it was most organizations are already doing this, right? Like most folks have some sort of on-the-job training kind of, you know, program. And so let's include that in the framework. Let's make that a way to be qualified, because it's practical and it's already happening. So some of this is, while some of it's new or some of it's an expansion of what was possible before, some of it is also like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing, but just keep track of it, right? Which I know is a little bit easier said than done sometimes. Again, KSAT level, residential qualifications is could be a part of your program. It doesn't have to be, though. It could be that you have an on-the-job training that has a set process associated with it already, and most folks do, and it's usually some sort of manager oversight and input, and over time the person becomes comfortable and can do the work. But any sort of artifacts to that effect that you may already be doing, that's kind of what they're looking for. Is like, hey, capture that, and then if you could report out on it, that's really what ultimately the goal is, that you can show that people are qualified because they went through this exercise, and we have the artifacts. Annual maintenance we talked about, so CPEs can be part of that, maintaining your certs, professional activities, etc. These are all things, and again, can be defined really at the residential level. So you can decide, what qualifies for ongoing annual maintenance. But I'll just keep driving this point home. Got to write it down, got to document it, got to track it. And that's, easier said than done. I think we all know that. So with that, I'm going to jump into the software itself, and give you guys a view of what CyberStar looks like and what it can do. Yeah, so I happen to be on the work role page here. It's not typically where I start, but I'll go ahead and start here because I mentioned, we can handle multiple frameworks. So right out of the box, we have 8140 and 8570 built in, pre-configured, but all of these things are configurable, like by either an administrator on your side, or by our, we have a service desk. So, we provide this software as a service. It's a KSATS application. It's web-based. We have a service desk, a help desk that can answer calls and help you with any sort of advanced configuration, etc. But we also provide the ability for you to do it yourself, and all kinds of documentation, user guides, etc. But pre-configured, and we do keep tabs, as I mentioned with the DoD CIO office. We're in regular conversations with them, and we're trying to keep up with, as they develop new qualification matrices, or if work roles change or KSATs change, we're keeping track of all that, and we're doing regular updates to the software, again, through these configuration settings, to keep it up to date. But you're also able to customize it, particularly on the residential side. You kind of have to. There is no pre-canned setup for that. So we keep all the information up to date as well as it's been known and published by the CWMB. So that's a nice starting point. And I mentioned let's look at 421, one of my favorites, the DBA. So all these things, are settings within the software, things like which workforce element, etc. But here's an example of the foundational qualifications, which have been published for a DBA. Here's all your options. So this is, akin to the 8570 baseline certs, but it's all those ORs. So I could have a Security Plus or a GSEC, or I could have an associate's degree, or there's all these trainings, like Marine Corps has got a bunch of trainings for this role. And then there's always this option. When I mentioned the KSAT assessment, it's really, what's called out in the manual as if you go through that assessment, then you can generate what is called a a specialized cyberspace workforce experience certificate. That's a lot of words, but that is sort of the artifact that results from doing that KSAT level assessment. So that's always an option. And there's also, again, called out in the manual, there's also always the ability for a waiver. Now these are intended to be, for special circumstances, deployments, long-term out of work, or, something where it's like you can't really, there's no way for you to meet the qualifications. And so we give you a waiver. And this happens all the time with 8572. Those are intended to be short-term, like 6 months kind of thing, but it is an option. And so if you have a waiver, great. But the idea here is that my foundational qualifications as a DBA could be any one of these things. And then I threw in here an example of residential qualifications. So I mentioned earlier, like, hey, we're an Oracle shop. So if you're a DBA at the basic level, I want you to have one of these 2 Oracle certs. And again, just an example, right? Like all done through configuration. But you have the ability to define other qualifications that you might want to apply to a particular work role and a particular proficiency level. And that's, I probably should have pointed that out here. You see each work role is in triplicate, right? Because it's a basic, intermediate, or advanced. And depending on which level you're at, the qualifications are different. So that's why the whole thing, multiplies out kind of like crazy, and is also really hard to track, from a manual standpoint. So we do, the product comes pre-configured with all this stuff. It can all be changed. I mentioned these collections. This is how we do that sort of menu of options is for every single. And you see the 8570s here too. If you're, might be a little more familiar to folks, but like, hey, if I'm an IET1, it's any one of these certs, so we can track multiple work roles and multiple frameworks simultaneously and report out on them individually as needed. We also capture like all credentials or qualifications, again, pre-configured with all the well-known ones, the ISC squareds and the CompTIAs and the EC councils, et cetera. But we also, pre-populate it with different kinds of degrees, all the trainings from the 8140 training repository are all in here as well. And so again, Army, Air Force, et cetera. There's lots of training courses that are already sort of condoned. So we already have those loaded and mapped in to those collections. So right out of the box, you've got like any qualification matrix that's been produced, published by the DoD, it's in here, and you can augment it, as needed. Let's see here. So I guess what I wanted to show, so from a leadership or management standpoint, what we also provide is, kind of a high level dashboard. So I'm sure lots of folks have, their boss is saying, hey, where are we at? Like how compliant are we? So we give you this really high level kind of simple dashboard view of things. As I can see my HQ group, man, they're 100%. They're good. Everyone's done their training for everything that they're assigned to. But I can see my IT group seems to be lagging a bit behind. And so we have the ability to download a very detailed report, and I'll show you an example of one right here, which basically, puts out a line for every, not just a line for every person, but a line for each requirement, each qualification that they're expected to meet. And so if I was concerned about my IT group, for example, I can go in here and say, well, what is going on with the IT group? Okay, it's not a huge group. That's, that tells me a little bit of something, but more importantly, I can go over and, each line is basically a a credential or qualification that's required. So I can go over here and see, I just want to, yeah, just show me like who's non-compliant, right? Or what's non-compliant. And I can see, you know, as part of the tooling, we can tell you not only like what is it that they need to do, but why are they not compliant? Oh, these are all new requirements. So either newly assigned work role, they just joined the group, etc. But we're tracking, you know, when is it due by, and what is it? And in this case, you know, a couple of them are contractors, so I can see their contract information. But this kind of boils everything down. And as you can see here, I've got a couple of, I've got an IET2 and an IET1 that were probably newly added to my group, but I also have a newly coded DCWF work role as that DBA basic. And so it's a good chance that they're not compliant because that just got assigned to them. So this report forms the basis of that year one reporting, which is I could show every user who's in a DCWF work role, for example. So the reporting is it's extensive. It's everything that you could possibly need. So I could go in here and just say, yeah, show me the DCWF. Oops. Sorry. That didn't work for some reason. But I could filter down to just the DCWF work roles, for example. I can really, you know, slice and dice this data in all different ways. We also have the capability of, you know, generating a number of different reports, and these are just frankly examples. Again, this is all highly customizable. But if I have reports I regularly want to run, I can set them up in the system here. So for example, I might want reports by affiliation, civ, mil, contractor, or I might just want general user like cyber awareness, or I might want, hey, show me all my privileged 8570. So all this can be, you know, highly customized. Look at things by group, by non-privileged 8570, by privileged 8570. Again, these are just examples, but the reporting can be configured and set up to be kind of whatever you want, but you always have the ability of the mega report that I was showing, like, and from that you can basically glean just about anything that you could possibly want out of the system. But again, there is the high level dashboard, the leadership version, managers version is the same, but it would just be groups that I manage. So we can kind of narrow it down so that if a manager is trying to keep track of just their staff, they have an easy way to view that. Again, I showed the personnel list is going to be, again, as a manager, I'm just going to see the folks that are in under my purview, and I can go in and for any person, you know, I might want to see, well, what's up with Jim here? He's not compliant, so I can get a quick view. Oh, he didn't. Well, maybe he's new. He didn't do any of his basic stuff, you know, cyber awareness, user agreement. So I can quickly drill down and see what's going on. But it's also important to note that the tool is going to notify these people. So it's like, I don't need to come in here and search around and find out what's going on. I can if I want to, but more importantly, if someone is onboarded, they're going to automatically be assigned whatever requirements exist for the organization. And then as soon as they're coded to a work role through the tool here, they will have those qualifications as well assigned to them. And they will show up in their to-do list, and they will show up and they will get email notifications, et cetera. So we'll notify them. So you set the policy here in the tool through configuration, and then the CyberStar takes care of executing the policy effectively. And I do want to show as an example here. Yeah, so I've got Miss Sarah Smith here. and she is an IET1 and also recently coded as software developer. And I can quickly look in here and say, oh, she's IET1 because she has her Network Plus, and she's considered compliant with software developer because she actually took one of the training courses that was considered a qualifier for that role. So in this case, again, multiple frameworks and different qualifications in this case. And those are captured, reported out on, and again, notifications go out if she wasn't compliant, for example. She would know right away and be directed, to the site. Let me find someone that's non-compliant just to show you. Yeah, so let's look at Joe Michaels here. Right, he's here's a great case where he's IET1, and great, he's compliant there because he's got his which one does he have? Network Plus, but he was recently coded as a DBA, work role code 421 and DCWF term, and for that, well, he's got his foundational qualifications because turns out he also has Security Plus, so great, that qualifies him there. But then, as I showed earlier, these residential qualifications, we said, well, we want our residential folks to be Oracle certified, and he's not, or at least he hasn't entered that information in. Maybe he is. So again, I can go in and I can essentially impersonate him as his manager and see kind of what he sees. So he would have gotten a email notification saying, hey, you got something to do, go check it out. He would log in, and this is what he would see. And what he would see is, hey, on my to-do list, what is this? I see some residential qualifications for DBA. Okay. Now, probably I, as his manager, already told him about this, but if I hadn't, he could still go in here and I don't know if you guys see these drop downs. I'm sorry, I realize that these don't always show up in the screen share, but he has an option, and if he's done his Oracle, certified junior associate, he can just enter it here and say, hey, I took it, I took it at the beginning of the month. I can upload my my document that says I did it and save that off. And then what will happen is, give it a second. Sorry, folks. Let me try this again. Oh, sorry, I didn't, this requires an expiration date. That was the problem. Okay, so he entered his Oracle certificate, and now what you see here is now that's pending verification because it was a manual upload. Now his manager, which is me, has to go verify it. So that's that whole trust but verify workflow. If I go back to my profile, what you'll see is I now have a to-do over here that, yep, sure enough, Joe Michaels uploaded his cert. I'll take a look at it and deem whether it's valid or not. If I verify, now he's that is considered a verified certification, and therefore, if I go back here to Joe, you can see even without impersonating him, like all of a sudden now he's fully compliant because he's met both his foundational qualification with his Security Plus and also the residential qualification with his Oracle cert. So that's kind of that's that trust but verify workflow. That's and again, these things are highly configurable and can be done, per installation, per organization. And CyberStar is built as it's certainly a web application, but it's built to be multi-tenant and multi deployment. So basically, if you want CyberStar for your agency or your organization, you basically get your own instance, and it could be housed within a larger, web instance, but everyone gets their own tenant. Everyone gets their own set of data. Again, we prime it with all the well-known stuff, but then from there you customize, and it's your data, it's your information, it's your people. We have a lot of capabilities for onboarding. Don't have a lot of time to go into some of this, but like we have the ability to import user information, which is typical, right? You got a whole bunch of folks and you got a spreadsheet. Awesome. We can import that information. We can get people into the system. We also, I forgot to mention this on the integration front, but we always do enterprise authentication integration. So you use your CAC or your PIV to log in. That way we're not, inventing some new auth system that doesn't take into account all the stuff you already have in place. So we can, and for example, with DCSA, we do this. Everyone logs in with their CAC, and then we can actually pull a certain amount of information from the CAC. So we can populate things, even if we don't know who you are. The first time you log in, we're going to find out information about you because we're leveraging your enterprise authentication. So you'll get in because you're allowed to be into systems within your organization, and then we can pull information from it and then populate, sort of your profile with whatever it is we can glean from that. But then we also give you the ability, hey, if you've got more information about these people, great. We have an entire data dictionary on, what the user profile data, what all the options are, et cetera. We can also import the individual, user credentials or qualifications. If you've got a spreadsheet of that stuff, awesome. We can pull that in. So we can bootstrap the system with whatever information you already have. And then begin to match people up with the work roles and the different groups and all these requirements. So, it's not again, it's a bootstrapping capability so that we can help take you from wherever you're at today and whatever information you have. We can take that in, and then that can be the basis by which you build out the rest of the system. And with that, I know we are just about 3 minutes out, and I do apologize. I've not been able to really pay much attention to the chat as I'm trying to go through all this stuff, or the questions. I do see a question here, though, in the Q&A. Is CyberStar plan to replace ATC for the Army, ATCTS for the Army? TBD. We don't see it replacing it, possibly augmenting it, but we are working really closely with the Army to build out capabilities for 8140 within the current system. But we also have, roadmaps of ways that they could transition to CyberStar, particularly for the DCWF workers. So we're in discussions with them. We will provide a solution for sure, but it's unclear just yet how that's going to look. But it's a good question. And yeah, again, I know we're just about at time here, so I apologize for not being able to follow along with the questions too much in real time, but we will capture the questions, and we're more than happy to answer them. you know, via email or certainly reach out to us if you're interested in more information, if you'd like a, you know, a demo for your group or organization, you know, we're more than happy to do that. I don't know, Bridget's on the line. She is our revenue and demo extraordinaire scheduler, so she can definitely help set anything up as a follow-on if need be.
I would be more than happy to, Rich. Thank you.
So with that, I guess I'll kind of wrap up the presentation. Thanks everyone for participating or showing up. Hopefully it was useful. And again, we're very open to more contact and happy to do further demonstrations.
Okay, and I saw the slides were going to be sent out, but are we able to download the recorded version of this for coworkers to review?
Yes, that will also be available as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I always forget that we record these things, which is a good idea because not everyone can show up, you know, understood.
Yeah. Give us about a day because it takes a while to download. We'll craft an email, stick the slides in there as well as the video.
Thank you very much.
All right, I believe we are at time. Thank you all for joining and thank you, Rich. That was a great presentation.
All right, thanks everyone.